The sun hung like a dying ember over Clay Rock Ranch, casting long shadows across the parched earth of southern Arizona territory. Silas Clay stood on his porch, squinting at the dust cloud rising from the distant road. His weathered hands instinctively found the Winchester propped against the doorframe. Old habits from the Apache wars died hard. Even 5 years after the last shot was fired, the ranch wasn't much to look at. A modest adobe house with thick walls to keep out the desert heat, a barn that leaned slightly eastward, and a well that ran dry more often than not. But it was his, carved from this unforgiving land with blood, sweat, and more regrets than a man should carry. The red rock formations that gave his ranch its name rose like ancient sentinels to the north, marking the edge of what used to be Apache territory, land that still whispered of old ghosts and older grievances. Silas was 43, though the desert had aged him beyond his years. Gray streaked his dark beard, and deep lines mapped the corners of his eyes from too many days squinting into the sun, watching for raiders who no longer came. He'd been alone here for 3 years now, ever since Martha died of the fever. Some said it was loneliness that killed her, being so far from civilization. But Silas knew better. It was the land itself, beautiful and cruel in equal measure. The rider emerged from the heat shimmer like a specter, even at a distance. Silas recognized the straight-backed posture of Reverend Samuel Morrison. Though the man looked frailer than when they'd last met, Morrison had saved Silas's life once, back in '68 when an Apache arrow had found its way between his ribs. The debt had never been spoken of, but it hung between them like an invisible chain. As Morrison drew closer, Silas noticed he wasn't alone. 2 figures on foot trailed behind his horsewomen, by their gait, though they moved with their heads down and shoulders hunched. Apache women. Silas's jaw tightened. "Silas!" Morrison called out, his voice carrying that same gentle authority it had possessed when he'd pressed hot iron against Silas's wound to stop the bleeding. The Reverend dismounted with obvious difficulty, his movements betraying some affliction. "Samuel!" Silas didn't move from the porch. His eyes stayed fixed on the 2 women who had stopped several yards back, as if they knew they weren't welcome. "Long way from your mission. I need your help, old friend." Morrison removed his wide-brimmed hat, revealing hair gone completely white. "These are Mary and Sarah Crow. They need shelter." Silas almost laughed at the Anglo names. Mary and Sarah? That what their mothers called them? It's what they answer to now. Morrison's tone carried a gentle rebuke. "They've been cast out from their people for helping me when I was injured. The very Christian thing would be, I'm no Christian. Samuel, you know that." "No, but you're a man who pays his debts." The words hung in the air like the buzzards that circled endlessly above the mesa. Silas studied the women more carefully. The older one, Mary, he supposed, stood protectively in front of the younger. She was perhaps 25, with a long scar running from her left shoulder down her arm. Her face was impassive, carved from the same stone as the mountains behind them. The younger one, Sarah, couldn't have been more than 18. She had the quick, nervous movements of a desert fox, and when she glanced up briefly, Silas caught sight of eyes that held too much fear for one so young. "Few days," Silas heard himself saying. "That's all." Morrison's relief was palpable. "God bless you, Silas. Don't—" The word came out harsher than intended. "And they sleep in the barn. I won't have—" He stopped himself, but the unspoken words hung heavy. The Reverend turned to the women and spoke in halting Apache. Mary responded with a single nod, her dark eyes finding Silas's for just a moment. There was no gratitude there, no supplication, only a wary assessment, like a wolf sizing up another predator. Morrison departed within the hour, claiming urgent business at his mission to the south. Silas suspected the old man was sicker than he let on, but pride was a currency they all traded in out here. As the Reverend's horse disappeared into the shimmering distance, Silas was left alone with his unwanted guests. He set them to work immediately. The barn needed mucking out, and there were fence posts that required mending. He told himself it wasn't cruelty. Everyone earned their keep on a ranch. But he knew the truth. Work meant distance. Distance meant safety. Mary took to the tasks without complaint, her movements efficient and practiced. She'd clearly done ranch work before. Sarah was less steady, her smaller frame struggling with the heavy posts. When Silas caught her sneaking water from the barrel, he said nothing, just made a mental note to keep the good supplies locked up. As evening painted the sky in shades of blood and amber, Silas prepared a simple meal: beans, hardtack, and strips of dried beef. He ate on the porch while the women took their portions to the barn. Through the open door, he could hear them talking in low voices, their language flowing like water over stones. It stirred memories he'd rather forget, screaming in the night, the acrid smell of burning hogans, children running. He shook his head violently, banishing the images. Those days were done. He was a different man now, a rancher, nothing more. When full dark came, bringing with it the desert's chill, Silas made his rounds. He checked the horses, secured the chicken coop against coyotes, and finally approached the barn. The women had made beds from hay in the far corner. Mary sat upright, her back against the wall, while Sarah lay curled beside her. "There's blankets in the house," he found himself saying. "I'll fetch them." Mary's eyes glinted in the darkness. "We need nothing from you." Her English was accented but clear. "Suit yourself." He turned to go, then stopped. "Anyone comes around, you stay hidden. There's men in these parts who, well, you stay hidden." "We know about such men." Her voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Silas returned to his house and barred the door. He loaded his Colt and placed it on the nightstand, then lay fully clothed on his narrow bed. Sleep wouldn't come easy. It never did when strangers were about. He found himself straining to hear any sound from the barn, any indication of movement. The coyotes began their nightly chorus, their yips and howls echoing off the canyon walls. Once, he might have found it peaceful. Now it only reminded him how far he was from anything resembling civilization. Sometimes he wondered if he'd chosen this isolation as penance, surrounding himself with emptiness to match what was inside. Near midnight, he heard footsteps, soft, careful, but not careful enough. His hand found the Colt's grip. The footsteps paused near the well, and he heard the creak of the bucket being lowered. Just fetching water. Then he relaxed fractionally but kept the gun close. Through his window, he could see a figure in the moonlight. Sarah, her movements quick and furtive. She filled a clay pot and started back toward the barn, then stopped. For a long moment, she stood perfectly still, looking up at the stars. The moon turned her into a silver sculpture, and Silas felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. She was so young. What had she done to earn exile from her people? Helped a white missionary? Morrison had said, such a small thing to lose everything over. He must have shifted, because Sarah's head snapped toward his window. They stared at each other across the dust yard, predator and prey, though Silas wasn't sure which was which. Then she was gone, melting back into the shadows like a ghost. Silas lay back, but his mind wouldn't quiet. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd put them to work on the far fence line, keep them away from the house, away from him. A few days. Morrison had asked for. He could manage that. He'd close his ears to their whispered conversations, close his heart to their circumstances. He'd learned long ago that caring for anyone in this hard country only led to pain. But as he finally drifted toward sleep, he found himself thinking about that scar on Mary's shoulder. Someone had hurt her, marked her, despite himself. He wondered who, and worse, he wondered why he cared. The last thing he heard before sleep took him was the sound of quiet weeping from the barn. He pulled his pillow over his head and pretended not to hear, even as something inside him twisted like a knife. 3 nights had passed since the women arrived, and Silas had developed a routine. He'd rise before dawn, leave food on the porch step, and busy himself with ranch work until they emerged from the barn. He'd grown accustomed to their quiet presence, Mary's steady competence with the horses, Sarah's tentative attempts to gather eggs without startling the chickens. They worked without complaint. and he paid them with silence and distance. But tonight felt different. The air hung heavy and still, the way it did before a storm, though no clouds marked the star-filled sky. Silas lay on his bed fully clothed, as had become his habit, listening to the familiar sounds of the desert night. His Winchester rested against the wall, the Colt on his nightstand, always within reach. Then he heard it. Soft voices from the barn, barely audible above the chirping of crickets. Not unusual in itself, but something in the rhythm of their conversation made him strain to listen. They were speaking English, broken, halting, but English nonetheless. "We cannot stay here much longer." Mary's voice, low and urgent. "He watches us like a hawk watches mice." "But where would we go?" Sarah's response carried a tremor of fear. "The Reverend said, 'The Reverend is dying. You saw how he coughed, blood on his handkerchief.'" Silas's breath caught. Morrison was sick. The man had saved his life. And now, "Then we must reach him," Sarah insisted. "He needs us." "With what money? How would we travel? 2 Apache women alone?" Mary's laugh was bitter. "We would not make it 10 miles before someone— No, we need another way." There was a long pause. Silas found himself holding his breath, waiting. "He has money," Sarah whispered. "The rancher. I saw a strongbox under his bed when I brought water to the house yesterday." "You went inside?" Mary's voice sharpened with alarm. "The door was open. I only meant to leave the water, but I saw— Foolish girl!" "If he had caught you— But he didn't. And Mary, if we had that money, we could hire protection, reach the Reverend, maybe even go further south, to Mexico, where—" "Stop!" Mary's command cut through the night. "You're talking about stealing from a man who has given us shelter. Shelter in a barn. We're no better than his animals. It's more than we had before." Another silence stretched between them. Silas's hand had found its way to his gun without conscious thought. So they planned to rob him. He'd been a fool to let Morrison's debt cloud his judgment. These were Apache women, desperate and dangerous, and he'd let them into his home. He could be the key, Mary said finally. Her words so quiet Silas almost missed them. The key? To what? His strongbox? His mind raced. He had maybe $200 hidden away. His life savings. Meant for— what? He'd never really known. Just something to hold on to. Proof that he'd built something from nothing. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "Think, little sister. A white man who lives alone, far from town, who works his own land, speaks to no one, who looks at us with eyes full of ghosts. So perhaps he's not what he seems. Perhaps he has reasons to help us that go beyond the Reverend's request." "You mean, you think he might?" "I think nothing. But I watch. I see how he flinches when we speak our language. How he knows exactly how to move around horses trained for war. The scars on his hands aren't just from ranch work." Silas's blood ran cold. The woman was too observant by half. "You're saying he was a soldier?" Sarah breathed. "I'm saying he has secrets. And men with secrets can sometimes be persuaded." "Mary, no, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking we need to survive. The Reverend won't last another month. His mission will close. And then what becomes of us? We can't go back to our people. The white towns won't have us. We exist nowhere." The pain in her voice caught Silas off guard. He'd been so focused on his own ghosts. He'd never considered theirs. "The rancher isn't cruel," Sarah said softly. "He could have been much worse. Not being cruel isn't the same as being kind. He tolerates us because of his debt. When that debt is paid, we'll be back on the road with nothing." "Then what do you propose?" Mary was quiet for so long Silas thought the conversation had ended. Then, "We wait. We watch. We learn who Silas Clay really is. And when the time comes, we use that knowledge. Use it how? However we must." The finality in her tone ended the discussion. Silas heard them settling down for sleep. The rustle of hay, Sarah's quiet cough. His mind churned with what he'd heard. They knew he'd been a soldier. They planned to— what? Blackmail him, seduce him. The thought of Mary's dark eyes and proud bearing flashed unbidden through his mind, and he cursed under his breath. He should throw them out, come morning. Debt or no debt. Morrison would understand, but something held him back. Maybe it was the resignation in Mary's voice when she'd said, "We exist nowhere." He knew that feeling too well, caught between worlds, belonging to neither. Sleep wouldn't come. Memories he'd buried deep clawed their way to the surface. The weight of his rifle, the screams of women and children as their village burned. Orders followed without question, because that's what soldiers did. The Aboriginal girl who'd fought her own family rather than see them harbor enemies of the state. Her eyes as she'd driven the knife in. Not dead, but wishing they were. He rolled out of bed and walked to the window. The barn stood silent in the moonlight, giving no hint of the desperate conversation it had witnessed. Two women, cast out for showing mercy to a white man, now plotting against another white man who'd shown them none. The irony wasn't lost on him. Dawn came like a blessing, giving him an excuse to move, to work, to stop thinking. He left food on the step as usual, a bit more than previous mornings, though he couldn't say why. When the women emerged, he was already mending harnesses in the shade of the barn. Mary approached with her usual cautious grace. Up close, he could see the weariness in her eyes, the weight she carried. "We'll work the Northfield today," she said. It wasn't a question. "Fence needs fixing out there," he agreed, not meeting her gaze. Sarah appeared with tools, moving slowly. As the sun climbed higher, her movements became more sluggish. By midday, she was swaying on her feet. "Girl needs water," Silas said roughly, watching her struggle with a post. "She's fine," Mary replied, but her eyes showed concern. "She's not. This heat's too much if she's not used to hard labor. We're Apache. We know heat. You know desert heat. This is different, working in it. No shade, no rest." He found himself walking towards Sarah without deciding to, "Come on, girl, let's get you some water." Sarah looked to Mary, who nodded reluctantly. Silas led her to the well, drew up fresh water. She drank greedily, then swayed. Without thinking, he caught her as she fell, his arms suddenly full of slight, fevered woman. "The barn," he said gruffly. "Get her to shade." He carried her easily. She weighed no more than a child. Inside the barn, he laid her on the hay, noting how Mary hovered protectively nearby. Sarah's skin burned with heat, and her breathing came shallow. "Heat sickness," he diagnosed. "Seen it plenty. She needs cool water. Rest." He found himself kneeling beside her, using his bandana soaked in well water to cool her face and neck. His hands, so used to violence, moved with unexpected gentleness. When Sarah's eyes fluttered open, they fixed on his face with something like wonder. "You helped," she whispered. "Don't read into it," he said, but his voice lacked its usual edge. Mary watched from the shadows, her expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why what?" "Why help her? We're nothing to you." He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the proximity. Morrison asked for a few days' shelter. Hard to shelter dead women. Is that all? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning he didn't want to examine. "That's all," he said firmly, and strode from the barn. But that night, he found himself listening again for their voices. When he heard Sarah's weak laughter at something Mary said, relief flooded through him. He was going soft, letting these women affect him. Tomorrow, he promised himself, tomorrow he'd reassert distance. Yet, when he finally slept, he dreamed not of burning villages, but of a young woman's fevered face looking up at him with trust he hadn't earned. And somewhere in that dream, Mary stood watching, her dark eyes holding secrets and promises in equal measure. He woke with a start, heart racing. Through his window, he could see a figure near the well, Mary, collecting water for her sister. She moved like a dancer, each gesture purposeful and graceful despite her worn dress and bare feet. As if sensing his gaze, she turned toward his window. For a moment that stretched like hours. They looked at each other across the dusty yard. Then she was gone, leaving only the memory of her silhouette against stars. Silas lay back, gun still in reach but feeling oddly distant. They planned to use him somehow, these women who existed nowhere, but lying there in the dark. He wondered if perhaps he was already lost. After years of careful isolation, of holding the world at arm's length, something had shifted. The thought terrified him more than any Apache war party ever had. The morning after Sarah's collapse came harsh and bright. Silas had barely slept, his mind churning over what he'd overheard, what he'd felt when he'd carried her slight form to safety. He emerged from his house to find Mary already at the well, drawing water with mechanical precision. "How is she?" The words escaped before he could stop them. Mary didn't look up. Better, the fever broke near dawn. "Good." He turned to go, then stopped. Something in him, perhaps the sleepless night, perhaps the weight of too many secrets, compelled him to speak. "About what you discussed, your plans." Mary's hand stilled on the rope. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression carved from stone. "You heard. It wasn't a question." Silas nodded. "These walls aren't as thick as you might think." "Then you know we mean to survive." "By robbing me? Using my secrets?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "What secrets do you think I have that would help you?" Mary studied him for a long moment. "You were at Camp Grant." The words hit him like a physical blow. Camp Grant, where over 100 Apache, mostly women and children, had been murdered while under the protection of the army, where he'd arrived too late to stop it but early enough to see the aftermath. "How could you possibly? Your hands shake when you sleep. You call out names, Apache names." Her voice held no accusation, only fact. "You speak our language in your dreams, better than you should." "I was a soldier. We all learned." "No." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "You learned from someone who trusted you, someone who taught you the words for beloved and sorrow and forgive me." Silas felt exposed, flayed open. "You're wrong. The scar on your ribs. Sarah saw it when your shirt came untucked yesterday. That's not a war wound. That's from an Apache arrow, shot at close range. The kind of wound you get when someone who knows you wants you to hurt but not die." His hand went involuntarily to his side. "Stop. We know suffering when we see it. Silas Clay. We know the look of a man carrying ghosts." Mary's voice gentled, though her gaze remained steady. "You think we would judge you? We who help the enemy of our people? Morrison isn't anyone's enemy." "No, but we didn't know that when we found him. We saw only a white man, wounded, possibly dying. Everything we'd been taught said to leave him. Our families begged us to walk away. But Sarah..." Mary's composure cracked slightly. "Sarah said his eyes looked kind, so we helped him. Brought him water, food, medicine, hidden from our own people. And they cast you out for it. Worse." The single word carried volumes. "They made us choose, prove our loyalty by ending his life ourselves, or leave forever." Sarah emerged from the barn then, moving slowly but steadily. In the morning light, Silas could see bruises on her arms he hadn't noticed before. Not from work, older, fading to yellow-green. "So you chose exile," he said. "We chose mercy," Sarah corrected softly, "even knowing the cost." The three of them stood in the dusty yard, unlikely conspirators bound by choices that had stripped them of their worlds. Silas felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling that he'd spent years building. "The Reverend is dying," he said. "It wasn't a question," Mary nodded. "Consumption. We think he hides it well, but how much do you need?" Both women stared at him. Sarah spoke first. "What?" "To reach him, to help him." "How much?" "We weren't going to rob you," Sarah said quickly. Mary only meant... I know what she meant. Silas met Mary's gaze. "Using knowledge as leverage. It's smart, but unnecessary." He turned toward his house. "Come inside, both of you." They followed warily, Sarah leaning slightly on her sister. It was the first time they'd entered his home, and Silas saw it through their eyes, sparse, functional, a place of survival rather than living. He knelt by his bed, pulled out the strong box they'd already known about. $217. His entire worth reduced to paper and coins. Take it. Mary's intake of breath was sharp. We cannot. You can. You will. He stood, pressed the box into her hands. But not for free. Their wariness returned instantly. Sarah stepped back. Mary's face hardened. What price? The truth. All of it. What Morrison did to earn such loyalty. What really happened when you chose exile. And... He hesitated, then forged ahead. What you really meant when you said I could be the key. The sisters exchanged glances. Finally. Mary set the strongbox on his rough table and sat. Sarah joined her, and after a moment, Silas took the third chair. The Reverend came to our territory 2 winters ago, Mary began. Not to convert us. He said God lived in our ceremonies as much as his. He came to learn, to understand. The elders were suspicious, but he was patient, gentle. He helped with the harvest, tended the sick, never pushed his beliefs. I was ill, Sarah added. The coughing sickness, many died that winter. But the Reverend had medicine. He sat with me for days, cooling my fever, forcing broth between my lips when I was too weak to eat. He saved her life, Mary said simply. Asked nothing in return. But that wouldn't be enough to turn your people against you, Silas said. Mary's jaw tightened. No, that came later. When the army patrol came through, they were hunting what they called renegades, warriors who'd refused to surrender. The patrol captain. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He was not a good man. He decided our band was hiding the fugitives. When we denied it, he grew angry, said he would burn the village unless we produced the guilty ones. Morrison tried to intervene. Sarah whispered. Told the captain he'd been living with us, that we were peaceful. The captain struck him down, called him an Indian lover. Silas's hands clenched. He knew the type of officer they described, had served under more than one. The captain gave us until dawn, Mary continued. Produce the renegades or burn, but we had no renegades to give him. So that night, some of the young men decided if the soldiers wanted Apache enemies, they would create them. They planned to attack the patrol, Silas said. A foolish plan that would have brought destruction on all of us. Morrison knew this. Despite his injuries, he slipped out in the darkness, rode to the patrol camp, warned them of the ambush. He betrayed your people to save them. Yes, the soldiers were ready. The young men who attacked were cut down quickly. 3 died, brothers, sons. Mary's voice remained steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. The captain was satisfied. He'd found his renegades. He left, and Morrison collapsed. We were tending him when the families of the dead discovered what he'd done. They wanted blood, Sarah said. His blood. Said he'd proven himself false, that his kindness had been a trick to make us weak. They gave us a choice, kill him ourselves to prove our loyalty, or be cast out as enemies. So you ran. We carried him between us for 2 days until we reached a Mexican trader's camp. The trader took him to his mission. We tried to return home, but... Mary touched the scar on her shoulder unconsciously. They made their feelings clear. Your own people did that. My uncle, he said it was kinder than what the others wanted. She looked at Silas directly. So you see, we understand the weight of impossible choices. We know what it means to be caught between duty and conscience. Silas stood abruptly, walked to the window. The desert stretched endlessly, offering no answers. Behind him, the women waited. Her name was Ayanna, he said finally. Met her when I was stationed at Fort Buchanan. She was the interpreter's daughter, educated by missionaries. Could read and write better than most soldiers. We grew close. He'd never spoken these words aloud, never given voice to the memories that haunted him. But something about these 2 women, their own losses, made it possible. I taught her to shoot. She taught me to see her people as more than enemies. We talked about a future, somewhere far from the territory, where such things might be possible. He laughed bitterly. Fools. Both of us. What happened? Sarah asked gently. Orders came. Her band was to be relocated to San Carlos. She begged me to help them resist, said it was a death sentence, that they'd starve there. I tried to convince my captain, but he shrugged. I was just a sergeant. My words meant nothing. So you followed orders. I followed orders. Helped round up her family, her people, watched them loaded into wagons like cattle. She looked at me like I'd ripped out her heart. Maybe I had. The room was silent but for the buzz of flies and the distant cry of a hawk. 3 months later, word came that she'd died. Fever, they said, but I knew better. She died of a broken heart or broken faith. Same thing, maybe. The scar, Mary prompted softly. Got careless after that. Took risks. During a skirmish. Let one of their warriors get too close. He could have killed me. Should have. Instead. Silas touched his side. Found out later it was her brother. He wanted me to suffer, not die. Wanted me to carry the mark of what I'd done. And you do? Every day. Sarah had moved without his noticing. Her small hand touched his arm, gentle as a butterfly. She would forgive you. No, Silas said roughly. She wouldn't, shouldn't. Then we'll have to do it for her, Mary said. The words broke something in him. He sank into his chair, head in his hands. These women who had lost everything for choosing mercy now offered it to him freely. The irony was overwhelming. Take the money, he said again. Get to Morrison. Help him. Come with us. He looked up sharply. Mary's expression was serious, determined. You can't stay here forever, punishing yourself. Come with us. Help us get the Reverend to safety. Then, she shrugged, then we'll see. I have a ranch to run. You have a grave to tend, Sarah corrected. This isn't living, Mr. Clay. This is just waiting to die. He wanted to argue, to retreat behind his walls, but looking at them, Mary's fierce dignity, Sarah's gentle strength, he felt those walls crumbling entirely. I'll think about it, he heard himself say. Mary stood, picked up the strongbox. We leave at first light, with or without you. She moved toward the door, then paused. The key we spoke of, it wasn't to your money or your secrets. It was to your redemption. Morrison saw it, said you were a good man who'd lost his way. Morrison's always been too generous with his assessments. Perhaps. Or perhaps he sees more clearly than you think. They left him then, returning to the barn with his life savings and his exposed soul. Silas sat alone in his empty house, surrounded by the ghosts he'd collected. But for the first time in years, they seemed quieter, less accusatory. Outside, the sun began its descent toward the red rocks. Tomorrow would bring choices, stay in his self-imposed exile, or follow 2 Apache women on what might be a fool's errand. He thought of Ayanna, of the dreams they'd shared. She'd wanted him to be better than his uniform allowed. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to try. The decision came with the dawn. Silas found himself loading his saddlebags before he'd consciously chosen to leave, his hands moving with purpose while his mind still wrestled with doubt. Through his window, he could see the sisters preparing for departure, their few possessions bundled in worn blankets. He'd spent the night studying maps, calculating routes. The mission where Morrison stayed lay 3 days south, through country that grew more lawless with each passing mile. The war had ended years ago, but its orphans, deserters, raiders, men with nothing left to lose, haunted the borderlands like ghosts. You're coming. Mary's voice held no surprise when he emerged leading his horse and a sturdy pack mule. Someone needs to keep you from getting killed, he muttered, avoiding her knowing gaze. Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face. The Reverend was right about you. The Reverend's a fool who sees good where there isn't any. But Silas found himself checking their bundles, redistributing weight for easier travel. Can you both ride? We walked here, Mary said. That won't work where we're going. He'd already saddled his spare horse, a gentle mare named Buttercup, Martha's horse, though he didn't say so. Sarah, you'll take her. Mary, you'll ride with me until we can get another mount. Mary's eyes narrowed. I can walk. Not at the pace we'll need to set. Not if we want to avoid the Colton gang. Both women stiffened, even in their isolation. They'd heard of Jake Colton and his band of cutthroats, former Confederate irregulars who'd never accepted the war's end. They'd turned their hatred toward anyone they deemed inferior, Mexicans, Indians, and those who helped them. They're working this territory? Mary asked. Last I heard, they were raiding near Skeleton Canyon, but they move like smoke. Best we move faster. He helped Sarah mount, noting how her hands trembled slightly. Despite her fear, she sat straight, gathering the reins with determination. When he turned to Mary, she was already approaching his gelding. Rex, I'll need help, she admitted quietly. The words cost her. He could see it in the rigid set of her shoulders. Silas mounted first, then extended his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, allowing him to pull her up behind him. Her arms circled his waist, her body warm against his back. Sorry, she murmured, her breath stirring his hair. Nothing to apologize for. His voice came out rougher than intended. He could smell sage and something uniquely her earth and strength and femininity combined. Hold tight. Rex can be spirited. They rode out as the sun cleared the mountains, leaving Clay Rock Ranch to the dust and shadows. Silas didn't look back. He'd learned long ago that sentiment was a luxury the frontier didn't allow. The first day passed without incident. They kept to the less traveled paths, Silas reading the land with the skill of long practice. He showed the sisters how to watch for sign-disturbed brush that might indicate recent passage, circling buzzards that could mark violence, dust clouds that might be riders or merely wind. You're teaching us to be soldiers, Mary observed during a rest stop. I'm teaching you to survive. Out here, they're the same thing. Sarah had grown more confident on horseback, though she still gripped the saddle horn when they navigated rough terrain. She'd taken to scanning the horizon constantly, her quick eyes often spotting movement before Silas did. Antelope, she'd say, or dust devil, each time with quiet pride. As evening approached, they made camp in a box canyon with high walls and only one entrance, defensible, with a small spring for water. Silas set the sisters to gathering firewood while he tended the horses and checked his weapons. No fire tonight, he decided, studying the sky. Too clear, too still. Smoke would be visible for miles. They ate cold biscuits and jerked meat, washing it down with spring water that tasted of minerals. As darkness fell, bringing the desert's chill, Silas gave Mary his coat. She protested, but he cut her off. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Can't have you catching cold. Sarah curled close to her sister, sharing warmth. Silas took first watch, positioning himself where he could see the canyon entrance. The stars emerged in their millions. The Milky Way, a bright river across the sky. I never thanked you, Mary said softly. She'd moved to sit beside him, the coat wrapped around her shoulders. For believing us. For helping. Haven't helped yet. Still 2 days to the mission, assuming no trouble. Still. She was quiet for a moment. Why did you really come? Silas considered his words. Maybe I'm tired of being alone with my ghosts. Maybe your sister was right. I've been waiting to die instead of trying to live. And now? Now I'm riding south with 2 women who shouldn't trust me, toward a sick man I owe my life to, probably into more trouble than any of us can handle. He smiled grimly. Feels more alive than I've been in years. Mary shifted closer, perhaps unconsciously. Ayanna, do you think of her often? Every day. The admission came easily in the darkness. Wonder what she'd make of all this. I think she'd be glad you're helping us. You didn't know her. No, but I know you loved her. Love like that doesn't choose cruel men. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, answered by another. The desert was alive with small sounds, creatures hunting and hiding, the eternal dance of predator and prey. You should sleep, Silas said eventually. I'll wake you for second watch. I don't think I can. Too much. She gestured vaguely at the vast darkness around them. First time away from walls? First time away from everything I've known. Her voice carried a mix of fear and wonder. Is it always like this? So big? Gets bigger the further you go. Some men lose themselves in it. Others find themselves. He glanced at her profile. Silvered by starlight. Which will you be? I don't know yet. She pulled his coat tighter. Sarah thinks we'll find a new life in Mexico. Build something fresh. And you? I think we'll always be between worlds. Too Apache for whites. Too changed for our own people. She turned to face him. Like you. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Means we can see both sides clear. Or neither. He had no answer for that. They returned to watching, alert for any movement, any sign of danger. When Mary finally dozed against his shoulder, he didn't wake her. Her weight was comfortable, grounding, a reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. Sarah relieved him near midnight, moving with the quiet grace her people were known for. She studied her sleeping sister with tender eyes. She hasn't slept that peaceful since we left, she whispered. The trail's hard on her? Everything's hard on her. She carries too much, blames herself for our exile. Sarah settled into his spot, checking the rifle he'd left within reach. She thinks if she'd been stronger, found another way. There wasn't another way. I know, but knowing and feeling are different things. She looked at him shrewdly. You understand that better than most. Silas retreated to his bedroll without answering, but sleep eluded him. He was too aware of Mary's presence, of the soft sounds of their breathing, of how natural it felt to have them near. Dangerous thoughts for a dangerous time. The second day brought signs of trouble. Fresh horse tracks crossed their path, too many to be innocent travelers. Silas altered their route, adding miles but avoiding the obvious trails. They climbed higher into rocky country, where pursuit would be difficult, but where they were also exposed. There! Sarah pointed to a dust plume rising from the valley below. Silas studied it through his field glasses. 6 riders, moving fast. Could be anyone. Could be Colton, Mary said. Could be. He collapsed the glasses, made a quick decision. We push hard for the next hour. Get over that ridge. There's a trader's station on the other side, Miguel Fernandez's place. He's flexible about his customers, but he hates Colton. Burnt his nephew's farm last year. They rode hard. The horses lathered with sweat by the time they crested the ridge. Below, a cluster of adobe buildings marked Fernandez's station, part store, part fortress, part neutral ground for the various factions that moved through the borderlands. Miguel himself greeted them, a grizzled man with careful eyes and twin shotguns always within reach. His expression shifted from wariness to surprise when he recognized Silas. Clay, thought you'd buried yourself at that ranch. His gaze moved to the sisters, eyebrows rising. Interesting company you're keeping. Need supplies and information. Miguel, paying cash. Cash always talks. Miguel's grin revealed gold teeth. Come, come, the ladies look tired. Inside the fortified store, Sarah immediately gravitated toward the goods. Bolts of cloth, canned foods, ammunition. Mary stayed close to Silas as he negotiated with Miguel. Colton's boys were through here yesterday, Miguel said quietly. Looking for 2 Apache women, said they'd escaped from the reservation, killed a guard. That's a lie, Mary hissed. Of course it is, Miguel agreed. Colton lies like he breathes, but lies with guns behind them are still dangerous. Where were they headed? South, toward the mission lands. Same as you, I'm thinking. Silas cursed under his breath. Any way around them? Perhaps, for the right price. I might remember an old smuggler's trail. Very difficult, but faster than the main route. Miguel named a figure that would take most of their remaining funds. Done, Mary said before Silas could haggle. Miguel's grin widened. I like her. Knows when saving time is worth more than saving money. As they prepared to leave with fresh supplies and Miguel's hand-drawn map, the trader pulled Silas aside. Be careful. My friend, Colton's got religion lately. The kind that says anyone helping Indians is a traitor to the white race. He catches you with those women. I know. Do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're riding straight into hell for people you barely know. Silas glanced at the sisters, who were securing supplies on the pack mule. Sarah laughed at something Mary said, the sound bright in the dusty air. Maybe that's exactly what I'm doing. He admitted. Miguel clapped him on the shoulder. Then you're either finding your soul or losing your mind. Either way, vaya con Dios. They took the smuggler's trail as darkness fell, navigating by moonlight through narrow passages that would have been treacherous in full day. Silas led on foot, Rex's reins in one hand, his rifle in the other. Behind him, the sisters followed in tense silence. Near midnight, they heard it, horses moving fast on the main trail below. Silas motioned for absolute stillness. They pressed against the rock wall, hardly breathing. As the riders passed, he counted 8, maybe 9, more than before. They're gathering force, he whispered once the sound faded. For 2 escaped women? Mary's voice held grim understanding. No, they're planning something bigger. The mission, Sarah breathed. They're going to attack the mission. The revelation changed everything. It wasn't just Morrison in danger now, but everyone sheltered there, the sick, the old, the children who always gathered wherever the Reverend set up his ministry. How much further? Mary asked. Silas calculated. If we push through the night, don't stop. Maybe reach them by noon tomorrow. Then we push. They drove themselves and their mounts mercilessly through the darkness. When Rex stumbled, Silas walked. When Buttercup faltered, Sarah dismounted and led her. They moved like ghosts through the wasteland, driven by purpose and growing dread. As dawn painted the mountains pink, they finally saw it, the mission of San Salvador, its bell tower rising above the desert floor like a beacon. Smoke rose from cook fires, peaceful and unaware. We made it, Sarah gasped. But Silas was studying the surrounding terrain with a soldier's eye. Too much cover for attackers, too few defenders visible. And there, in the distance, more dust plumes. We made it, he agreed grimly. But so did they. The mission bells were ringing for morning prayers as they rode through the gates. Silas took in the scene with quick assessment. Perhaps 30 souls scattered about the compound. Mostly Mexican families and a handful of Apache converts. Too many innocents. Too few fighters. Reverend Morrison emerged from the chapel, his frailty shocking even from a distance. The man who'd once carried Silas half a mile to safety now leaned heavily on a walking stick, his face gaunt beneath white hair. But his eyes still held their familiar warmth when he spotted them. My dear girls, he said as Sarah and Mary dismounted. I prayed you'd found safety. We found something better, Mary said, glancing at Silas. We found help. Morrison's gaze shifted to Silas, recognition dawning. My old friend. I'd hoped, but never expected. Samuel. Silas gripped the Reverend's extended hand, alarmed by how fragile it felt. We need to talk. Privately. They convened in Morrison's sparse quarters, a single room behind the chapel with a narrow bed, a desk covered in correspondence, and a cross on the whitewashed wall. The Reverend's cough punctuated their conversation, each spasm bringing flecks of blood to his handkerchief. Colton's coming, Silas said without preamble. Maybe 20 men, possibly more. They're using the sisters as an excuse, but this was planned. They want the mission. Morrison nodded slowly. I'm not surprised. We've been a thorn in their side, helping anyone who comes. Regardless of race, they've sent warnings. Why didn't you leave? Where would these people go? Morrison gestured toward the courtyard where children played. This is the only refuge for 100 miles. It's about to become a battlefield. Then we'll defend it. With what? I counted maybe 5 men who could hold a rifle, and that's being generous. Morrison smiled sadly. Faith, my friend. We'll defend it with faith. Faith won't stop bullets. No, but it might inspire courage. The Reverend studied him. You've changed. Silas, the man I knew would have ridden away from trouble. The man you knew was already dead inside. Silas moved to the window, watching Mary and Sarah distribute water to the mission's residents. They changed that. Ah. Morrison's knowing tone made Silas turn. Which one? I don't know what you mean. Of course you do. I may be dying, but I'm not blind. The way you watch them. He coughed again. Longer this time. When he recovered, his voice was weaker. Love comes strangely in the desert, doesn't it? Like rain, unexpected, transformative, sometimes destructive. This isn't the time. This is exactly the time. We may not have another. Morrison struggled to his desk, pulled out a worn ledger. I need you to know, if something happens to me, the girls have legal documentation here. I've recorded their assistance to me, their good character. It won't mean much to men like Colton, but in a court of law. Samuel, promise me you'll see them safe. Not just through this fight, but after. They deserve a chance at life. Before Silas could respond, commotion erupted outside. He rushed to the door to find one of the Mexican farmers pointing frantically toward the horizon. Dust clouds? Closer now. Perhaps 2 hours away. Gather everyone in the chapel, Silas ordered, his military bearing returning. Women and children in the back rooms. Every man who can shoot. Bring whatever weapons you have. The next hour was controlled chaos. Silas organized their pathetic defenses. 5 old rifles, 2 shotguns, a handful of pistols, and men who knew more about farming than fighting. He positioned them at windows and behind overturned wagons, trying to create overlapping fields of fire. Mary appeared at his elbow as he checked ammunition. Teach me to shoot. Mary, you have maybe 8 defenders for a compound this size. You need every hand. Her jaw set stubbornly. Teach me. He handed her his spare revolver, showed her the basics. Grip, sight, squeeze, don't pull. She learned with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. Within minutes, she was hitting targets at 20 paces. You've done this before. My father taught me to use a bow. The principle is similar. Breathe, aim, release. She reloaded with steady hands. Where do you want me? The bell tower. You'll have the best view. Can call out positions. He hesitated, then added, if things go bad, there's a ladder on the back wall. Take Sarah and run. And leave you? Her dark eyes held his. No. Mary. She stopped his words with a kiss, sudden, fierce, full of desperation and promise. When she pulled back, her expression was fierce. I choose my battles. Silas Clay, this one, I choose. She was gone before he could respond, climbing the bell tower stairs with her rifle and ammunition. Silas stood stunned for a moment, his lips still burning from her touch, before Sarah's voice snapped him back. They're coming! The raiders appeared like a dark wave across the desert, spread in a loose line to encircle the mission. Silas counted 23 men, all mounted, all armed. At their head rode Jake Colton himself, a giant of a man with a gray-streaked beard and the dead eyes of a natural killer. They stopped just outside rifle range. Colton rode forward alone, arrogant in his confidence. You in the mission, he called. We're looking for 2 Apache murderers, women who killed a guard at San Carlos. Send them out, and we'll be on our way. Morrison emerged from the chapel, leaning heavily on his stick, but standing straight. There are no murderers here, Mr. Colton. Only Christians seeking sanctuary. Christians? Colton spat. Apache can't be Christians. Reverend, they're animals, and those who harbor them are traitors. Then I gladly accept that title. Colton's face darkened. Last chance, old man. Send them out, or we'll take them, and anyone who stands in our way will answer to God for their choices. I answer to God every day, Morrison replied calmly. Can you say the same? The shot came without warning. Morrison crumpled, clutching his shoulder. Sarah screamed from inside the chapel. Silas had his rifle up and firing before the Reverend hit the ground, his bullet catching one of Colton's men in the chest. Take cover, he roared. The battle erupted. Raiders charged from multiple directions, firing as they came. The defenders responded desperately, their meager firepower barely slowing the assault. From the bell tower, Mary called out positions, her own rifle cracking steadily. Silas moved like the soldier he'd been, shooting, displacing, shooting again. He dropped 2 men attempting to breach the main gate, wounded another climbing the west wall. But there were too many, and his defenders were falling. "The chapel!" someone screamed. "They're at the chapel?" 3 raiders had circled around, were trying to break down the door where the women and children sheltered. Silas sprinted across open ground, bullets whining past. He shot 1 raider point blank, clubbed another with his rifle butt. The third turned on him, knife flashing. They grappled in the dust, rolling, each seeking advantage. The raider was younger, stronger, but Silas fought with desperate purpose. He thought of Sarah's trust, Mary's kiss, Morrison bleeding in the dirt. With a final surge, he drove his own knife between the man's ribs. Rising, bloodied and gasping, he saw Mary climbing down from the tower. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and he saw her mouth his name. Then her expression changed to horror, her rifle swinging up. "Behind you!" Silas spun, but too late. Colton's pistol was already aimed, the big man's grin triumphant. Time seemed to slow. Silas saw death coming and found, surprisingly, that he regretted only things left unsaid. The shot was impossibly loud, but it was Colton who staggered, looking down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest. Behind him, Sarah stood with Morrison's pistol, her small frame trembling but her aim true. Colton fell to his knees, then forward. His death took the fight out of his men. They withdrew in disorder, leaderless and demoralized, leaving their dead behind. In the sudden silence, Silas heard only his own harsh breathing and the cries of the wounded. Then Mary was there, her hands on his face, checking for injuries. "I'm all right," he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. His hands were shaking, his shirt soaked with blood, his own and others. "The Reverend," Sarah said urgently. "He needs help." They found Morrison where he'd fallen, barely conscious but alive. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, missing anything vital. As Sarah and Mary worked to stop the bleeding, he gripped Silas's hand. "You saved us," he whispered. "Sarah saved us," Silas corrected. "I just held the line." "You did more than that." Morrison's eyes moved to where Mary knelt beside him. "You found something worth fighting for again." As the mission's people emerged from hiding, tending wounded and giving thanks for their survival, Silas stood apart. The violence had awakened old instincts, old memories. He'd killed again, easily, naturally. The soldier he'd tried to bury was still there, waiting. Mary found him by the well, washing blood from his hands with mechanical precision. "You're thinking of leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "I brought this here. Colton came because of me, because I helped you. Colton came because he was evil. You stopped him. By becoming him, by doing what I swore I'd never do again." He couldn't meet her eyes. "You kissed a killer. Mary." She took his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. "I kissed a man who risked everything for strangers, who faced his demons to protect innocent lives." Her thumbs traced his cheekbones. "I kissed the man I'm falling in love with." The words undid him. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, feeling years of walls crumble entirely. She held him as he shook, offering no platitudes, only presence. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be whole." "Neither do I," she said. "But maybe we can learn together." Sarah joined them, slipping under Silas's other arm. The 3 of them stood there, bound by violence and sacrifice and something deeper, a connection forged in extremity but promising something gentler. "The Reverend will live," Sarah reported. "He's asking for you." They returned to Morrison's bedside, where the old man lay pale but smiling. "It seems," he said weakly, "that God has more work for me yet, and for you." His gaze included all 3 of them. "The mission needs protectors. The people need hope. Will you stay?" Silas looked at Mary and Sarah, saw his answer in their eyes. They'd found each other in the wasteland, 3 broken souls making something whole. The future was uncertain, dangerous, complicated by all the things that divided their worlds, but for the first time in years, it was a future worth facing. "We'll stay," he said. Outside, the desert wind carried away the gun smoke, and the mission bells rang again, this time in celebration of life preserved, of love found in the most unlikely ground. The mission had been quiet for 3 days since the attack. Colton's surviving men had scattered like coyotes, but Silas knew they'd regroup eventually. Men like that didn't forget defeat easily. He'd spent the time fortifying defenses and training the mission's residents in basic marksmanship, all while fighting the growing certainty that more violence would come. It was Sarah who noticed the dust cloud first, just after dawn on the 4th day. She'd taken to keeping watch from the bell tower, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon while Mary tended the wounded below. "Riders coming!" she called down. "From the east!" Silas grabbed his rifle and climbed quickly to join her. Through his field glasses, he counted 6 men moving at a steady pace. Not the scattered formation of raiders, but not friendly travelers either. "Wake the others," he told Sarah. "Quietly, no bells." As the mission stirred to alertness, the riders drew closer. Silas recognized the lead man's posture before he could make out features. Military bearing, even after years out of uniform. His stomach tightened. "Tom Brennan," he muttered. Mary appeared beside him. "You know them?" "The leader. Served together at Fort Grant." He lowered the glasses. "He's a bounty hunter now. Works for whoever pays best. They're after us." It wasn't a question. "Most likely, someone's put a price on your heads, probably the Indian Agency, making examples." He studied the approaching group. "Tom's thorough. He'll have papers, legal writs. Morrison won't be able to simply turn him away." "Then we run," Sarah said immediately. "We won't bring more trouble here." "No," Silas's voice was firm. "Running now means running forever. And you wouldn't make it a mile. Tom's got the best trackers money can buy." The riders stopped at the mission gates, Brennan dismounting with easy confidence. He was older than Silas remembered, gray threading through auburn hair, but still moved like a man half his age. His pale eyes swept the compound, noting defensive positions, counting potential threats. "Tom," Silas called down from the tower. Brennan's weathered face split in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Silas Clay. Heard you'd gone native, but didn't believe it till now. Just ranching. Last I checked." "That so? Funny place for a rancher. Holed up in a mission with Apache fugitives." "No fugitives here, just Christian converts seeking sanctuary." Brennan laughed. "Come on down. Silas, let's talk like civilized men." Silas descended, motioning for Mary and Sarah to stay hidden. In the courtyard, Morrison emerged from the chapel, moving slowly but with dignity despite his bandaged shoulder. "Gentlemen," the Reverend said, "how may we help you?" Brennan produced a folded document from his coat. "Federal warrant for 2 Apache women, goes by Mary and Sarah Crow. Wanted for theft, assault on a federal officer, and escape from San Carlos Reservation." "Those are lies," Morrison said calmly. "The young women you describe are members of my congregation. They've committed no crimes. That's for a judge to decide. I'm just here to collect them." Brennan's eyes never left Silas. "You're interfering with federal business by harboring them. Reverend, that's a hanging offense in some parts. Then I'll hang with a clear conscience." "Noble words." Brennan stepped closer to Silas, lowering his voice. "What's your stake in this? These women kin to that Apache girl you were sweet on? The one who died at San Carlos?" Silas's fist connected with Brennan's jaw before he'd consciously decided to strike. The bounty hunter staggered, but didn't fall, spitting blood and grinning. "There's the Silas I remember, all passion, no thought." He wiped his mouth. "You just assaulted a federal agent, friend, my boys witnessed it. Your boys can go to hell, maybe, but first, they'll tear this place apart looking for those women, unless—" Brennan's smile turned calculating. "You come with me, peaceful-like. Let me take you in for assault, and maybe I forget what I came here for." "No." Mary stepped from the shadows. Sarah close behind. "We won't let others suffer for us." Brennan's eyes lit with satisfaction. Ladies, you've led us quite a chase. Wait. Silas moved between them and the bounty hunter. What's the real story here? Tom, since when do you chase reservation jumpers? That's army work, not worth your time. Since someone offered $500 a head. Brennan shrugged. Seems these two made enemies in high places. Something about embarrassing an Indian agent, making him look weak in front of his superiors. Man wants his reputation back. Hoskins, Mary said with disgust. He tried to force himself on Sarah. When she fought back, he beat her. I stopped him. Beat him near to death. Way I heard it, Brennan said admiringly. Took his eye out with a grinding stone. He deserved worse, Mary said flatly. Maybe so, but he's got the law on his side, and you've got... Brennan glanced around. A shot-up mission and a lovesick ex-soldier. Silas felt the situation spiraling. Tom had 5 men, all experienced fighters. The mission's defenders were still recovering from Colton's attack. A fight now would be a massacre. Take me instead, Sarah said suddenly. I'm the one who hurt him. Mary was just protecting me. Let her go, and I'll come quietly. No, Mary grabbed her sister. We stay together. Actually, Brennan said, my orders are specific. Both of you, or no payment. Sorry, ladies. Silas saw it then, the slight shift in Tom's stance, the way his hand moved toward his gun. The talking was over. In seconds, violence would erupt again, and more innocents would die. The salt flats, he said quickly. Remember, Tom, Brennan paused. What about them? Summer of '67. Apache war party had us pinned down for 2 days. No water, no shade. You, me, and Hobbs. Hobbs died the first night. Arrow in the throat. No, he didn't. Silas met his eyes steadily. Took a Comanche lance in '65, fighting with the Texas Rangers. The man at the salt flats was Corporal Jim Watson. Boston boy, wouldn't shut up about missing snow. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You saying I don't know my own memories? I'm saying we've both done things in the desert we'd rather forget, seen things that weren't there, killed people who maybe didn't need killing. Silas kept his voice level, non-threatening. The heat, the isolation, it changes a man, makes him see enemies where there might be friends. These women are fugitives. That's fact. These women saved Morrison's life, nursed him when their own people cast them out for it. That's also fact. Silas gestured to the mission. Look around. Tom, we just fought off 23 raiders. Lost good people doing it. You want to add to the body count for $500 a head? It's not about the money. No, then what? Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried old pain. You remember my daughter, Beth? I remember. Fever took her while I was off chasing shadows in the desert. Chasing Apache who were just trying to live. My wife never forgave me. Said I valued duty over family. He looked at Mary and Sarah. Maybe she was right. Maybe we all made mistakes. Silas said quietly, maybe it's not too late to make different choices. The tension stretched taut. Brennan's men shifted restlessly, hands near weapons. Morrison began to pray silently. Mary and Sarah stood straight, ready to face whatever came. Finally, Brennan sighed. Watson loved that Boston snow, talked about it constantly. He folded the warrant, tucked it away. Seems I was mistaken. The women I'm looking for have distinctive scars, one on the left cheek, other on the right hand. These ladies bear no such marks. One of his men started to protest. But, boss, you questioning my eyes? Hartley? Brennan's voice carried steel. Because if you are, we can settle it right now. The man backed down. Brennan turned to Morrison. My apologies for the disturbance. Reverend, we'll be moving on. Tom, Silas called as the bounty hunter mounted his horse. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm getting old. Going soft. He gathered his reins. But Silas, This is a one-time thing. That Apache girl you loved. Ayanna, I was part of the detail that relocated her family. I saw what happened to her at San Carlos. The sickness, the despair. His voice dropped. I've got enough ghosts. Don't need more. He spurred his horse, his men following. They watched until the riders disappeared into the desert shimmer. He let us go, Sarah whispered. Why? Because even hard men have limits, Morrison said. And sometimes, grace finds a way. Mary turned to Silas, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You risked everything. Again. Not everything, he corrected. Not you. She came to him then, in full view of the mission, and kissed him deeply. This time it wasn't desperate but certain, a claiming and a promise. When they parted, Sarah embraced them both, creating a circle of connection that felt unbreakable. We can't stay here, Mary said eventually. Brennan might change his mind, or others will come. I know. Silas had been thinking the same. Morrison needs proper medical care anyway. There's a town, 2 days west, Sanctuary. Mixed population, Apache and Mexican and white. No one asks too many questions if you pull your weight. A place to disappear, Sarah said hopefully. A place to live, Mary corrected. She looked at Silas. All of us. He thought of his empty ranch, the ghosts that haunted it, thought of Ayanna and the life they'd never had. Then he looked at these 2 women who'd somehow broken through every wall he'd built. All of us, he confirmed. Morrison smiled, despite his pain. It seems God has answered prayers I didn't even know to pray. They spent the rest of the day preparing for departure. The mission would survive. Brennan's visit had oddly strengthened their reputation as a true sanctuary. Some of the Mexican farmers volunteered to stay as defenders. That night, as they kept vigil in Morrison's room, Sarah asked, Do you think we'll ever stop running? Everyone runs from something, Silas said. The trick is knowing when to stop and turn around. And fight, Mary asked. And live, he corrected. Fighting's easy. It's the living after that's hard. Mary leaned against his shoulder. Sarah curled at their feet. Outside, coyotes called to the moon, and the desert wind whispered of changes coming. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to navigate. But tonight, in this small circle of light and love, they were enough. 3 damaged souls who'd found each other in the wasteland, building something worth defending. Tell us about Sanctuary, Sarah requested drowsily. So Silas did, spinning stories of a place where differences mattered less than character, where the past could be honored without defining the future. He didn't know if such a place truly existed, but with Mary's hand in his and Sarah's trust warming the room, he was willing to search for it. The mission bells chimed midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. In a few hours, they'd load Morrison into a wagon and start west, toward uncertainty but away from the shadows that had trapped them all. For the first time in years, Silas Clay looked forward to sunrise. The road to Sanctuary stretched before them like a dusty promise. Morrison lay in the wagon bed, cushioned by blankets and tended by Sarah, while Mary rode beside Silas. They'd been traveling since dawn, the mission now a distant memory behind the heat shimmer. Riders, Mary said quietly, gesturing ahead. Silas had already seen them, a group of 8 men blocking the road where it passed between 2 rocky outcrops. Perfect spot for an ambush. His hand found his rifle, but Mary touched his arm. Wait, look at the one in front. The leader was a young man, perhaps 25, wearing the remnants of a Union uniform. As they drew closer, Silas could see the weariness in his posture, the hollow look of men who'd been running too long. That's far enough, the young man called out when they were within speaking distance. His voice carried a Boston accent. State your business. Traveling to Sanctuary. Silas replied calmly. Got a sick man, needs doctoring. Everyone's got troubles. Mister. The soldier's eyes flicked to Mary and Sarah. You're traveling with Apache. My wife and sister-in-law, Silas said without hesitation. The lie came easily, protectively. We're a family. The soldier laughed bitterly. Family? Must be nice. He swayed slightly in his saddle, and Silas noticed the dark stain on his side. Tell me, family man, you got any medical supplies in that wagon? Some. You're hurt. We're all hurt. The soldier gestured to his men. Now that Silas looked closer, he could see bandages, makeshift slings, the glassy eyes of fever. Deserters. They'll call us. But we just couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep hunting women and children, burning villages for crimes they didn't commit. Mary spoke up. You were at Skeleton Canyon. The soldier's head snapped toward her. How did you... He stopped, understanding dawning. You're Apache. You'd know the signs. My cousin died there. She was 12. I know. I mean... The soldier's voice cracked. I remember her. Tried to stop it. But Captain Henley, he said they were all hostiles. Said orders were orders. So you ran, Silas said. Wouldn't you, when orders mean murdering kids? The soldier laughed again. Sharp and broken. Now we're the hunted. Henley's got patrols out looking for us. Says we're traitors. Cowards. Sarah had climbed down from the wagon, medical supplies in hand. She approached the soldier slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Let me see your wound. Why would you help me, after what we've done? Because that's what separates us from men like Henley. She said simply, we choose mercy. The confrontation dissolved into an impromptu medical camp. Sarah and Mary worked on the wounded deserters while Silas kept watch. Morrison, despite his own pain, offered quiet counsel to men wrestling with guilt. The young soldier, Private Daniel Harper, he introduced himself, sat with Silas as the women worked. Never thought I'd see the day Apache would be patching up cavalry. Strange times. Silas agreed. Where will you go? Mexico, maybe. Somewhere the uniform doesn't mean anything. Harper studied Silas. You were military, I can tell. Was, long time ago. What changed? Silas watched Mary efficiently bandaging a man's shoulder, her movements sure despite the irony of healing those who'd hunted her people. I met someone who showed me there was another way to live. Took me years to understand the lesson, but, he shrugged. Your wife? In a manner of speaking. It wasn't entirely a lie. In the ways that mattered, Mary had become his partner, his anchor. Harper was quiet for a moment. I had a girl back in Boston. Wrote her about what we were doing out here. Thought she'd understand. She sent the letter back unopened. Some wounds can't be shared with those who weren't there. Is that why you're with them, the Apache women, because they understand? Silas considered the question. I'm with them because they make me want to be better than I was, because they look at me and see possibility instead of just the blood on my hands. Must be nice, Harper said wistfully, to be seen that way. Sarah approached with water and clean bandages for Harper's wound. As she worked, she spoke quietly. You tried to save her. My cousin, I see it in your eyes. The trying, the failing, it marks a man. Not enough, Harper whispered. Trying wasn't enough. No, Sarah agreed. But it was something, and sometimes, something is all we can manage. As the sun climbed toward noon, they prepared to part ways. The deserters would head south, hoping to reach the border before Henley's patrols caught up. Silas gave them what supplies they could spare, including ammunition. You know we might meet again, Harper said. On different sides, maybe. Or maybe we'll both find that new life we're looking for. The young soldier extended his hand. Thank you, for the help, and for not judging. We're all just trying to find our way, Silas replied, shaking his hand. As the deserters rode away, Mary moved to stand beside him. That was dangerous. They could have taken everything. They could have, but you were already walking toward them with medical supplies. She smiled slightly. I suppose we're both fools then. Romantic fools, Morrison corrected from the wagon. The best kind. They continued west, the encounter leaving them all thoughtful. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they spotted more riders approaching from behind. This time, Silas recognized the formation immediately. Military patrol, moving with purpose. "Henley's men," he said. "Looking for Harper's group." "We could warn them," Sarah suggested. "Too late. They're too far ahead." Silas made a quick decision. "Everyone stay calm. We're just travelers." The patrol swept up in a cloud of dust, led by a captain whose clean uniform and polished brass marked him as everything Harper's ragged band was not. His eyes were cold as they surveyed the small group. "Captain James Henley, 6th Cavalry," he announced. "We're pursuing deserters. 8 men, wounded, armed, and dangerous." "Haven't seen anyone matching that description," Silas said evenly. Henley's gaze lingered on Mary and Sarah. "Apache traveling freely, that's unusual." "They're with me," Silas said. "And you are?" "Silas Clay, rancher, escorting Reverend Morrison to medical care." "Clay," Henley's eyes narrowed. "I've heard that name. You served at Fort Grant." "I did. Under Colonel Mitchell. Interesting company you're keeping for a former Indian fighter." "War's over, Captain. We're all just trying to live now." "The war's never over," Henley said flatly. "Not as long as savages roam free and traitors help them." He leaned forward. "You wouldn't be one of those traitors, would you, Clay?" "I'm a rancher escorting a sick minister, nothing more." Henley smiled coldly. "Search the wagon." His men dismounted, began rifling through their supplies. Silas tensed, but Mary's hand on his arm kept him still. The soldiers found nothing incriminating. The medical supplies could be explained by Morrison's presence. "Clean," one soldier reported. "Too clean," Henley mused. "Blood on the ground here. Recent. Someone was treated." "I cut my hand," Sarah said quickly, showing a bandaged palm. "Mr. Clay helped me wrap it." Henley dismounted, walked slowly to where she sat. "Pretty little thing for an Apache. The deserters would have found you. Appealing." "Captain," Morrison spoke up despite his weakness, "these are Christian women under my protection. I'll thank you to speak respectfully." "Respect?" Henley laughed. "For Apache, they'd gut you in your sleep. Reverend, given half a chance." "The only violence I've seen today has been in your words," Morrison replied. Henley's face darkened. He stepped toward the wagon, hand moving to his sidearm. Silas shifted, ready to intervene. But Mary moved first. She stumbled, seemingly by accident, directly into Henley's path. As he reached to steady or push her aside, she spoke rapidly in Apache, her words flowing like water. Henley froze. "What did you say?" Mary looked up at him with innocent eyes. "I blessed you, Captain. Ask the spirits to guide you to what you seek. I don't want your heathen blessings, yet you have it anyway." Her smile was enigmatic. "The desert remembers all who pass through it. Your men, the ones you hunt, they all leave marks. Some marks lead to Mexico, others," she gestured vaguely northward, "others lead only to more desert." Henley stared at her, uncertain whether he'd been given intelligence or nonsense. Finally, he stepped back. "Mount up," he barked to his men. "We're wasting time." As quickly as they'd come, the patrol thundered off, heading north. Silas noted with silent appreciation. "You sent them the wrong way," he said once they were gone. "I told no lies," Mary replied. "The desert is north. If they choose to search there—" She shrugged eloquently. "Remind me never to cross you," Silas said, half joking. "You couldn't if you tried," she replied, but warmth softened the words. They made camp that night in a sheltered canyon with a small spring. Morrison seemed stronger, able to sit up and take solid food. As darkness fell, they gathered around a small fire, the day's encounters weighing on them. "We helped men who might have killed our people," Sarah said quietly. "Then misled men hunting those same deserters. Which was right?" "Both," Morrison said. "Neither. That's the nature of mercy. It doesn't choose sides based on uniforms or blood. It simply chooses life. Harper's group won't make it to Mexico." Silas said, "Henley's too good a tracker. He'll figure out Mary's misdirection. Double back." "Perhaps, Or perhaps they'll find their sanctuary first. Mary stared into the fire. We can't save everyone. Silas, we can only choose our moments. Is that enough? It has to be. Later, as Morrison and Sarah slept, Silas found himself alone with Mary by the dying fire. She leaned against him, her warmth a comfort against the desert's chill. You called me your wife today, she said. Seemed safer than the truth. Which is? He turned to look at her, seeing in her face all the complexities of their situation. Apache and white, past and future, love growing in impossible ground. The truth is, I don't have words for what you are to me, he admitted. Wife seems too small, too ordinary for this. Then don't use words, she suggested, and kissed him. When they finally parted, she smiled. Though wife would make certain things easier, legally speaking. Mary Crow Clay, he tested, has a ring to it. Better than Mary Crow the fugitive. Is that a proposal? He asked, half serious. It's a practical consideration, but also, she traced patterns on his chest. Also maybe a dream I've been having. Waking beside you without shame or secrecy. Building something lasting. In sanctuary, or wherever we land, the place matters less than the choosing. They sat in comfortable silence, planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Sanctuary might reject them. Henley might return. The past might catch up in ways they couldn't predict. But tonight, under stars that witnessed all human folly and grace with equal indifference, they had each other. It was, Silas reflected, more than he'd ever thought to have again. We should sleep, Mary said eventually. Long day tomorrow. Every day's long out here. Yes, she agreed, standing and pulling him up. But some are worth the journey. As they settled into their bedrolls, Silas thought about Harper and his desperate men, about Henley and his cold certainty, both trapped by choices made in violence, both running toward different kinds of destruction. He pulled Mary closer, felt Sarah shift nearby, heard Morrison's labored but steady breathing. They were a strange family, bound by circumstance and choice rather than blood. But perhaps that made them stronger. Tomorrow. Sanctuary. Tomorrow. Whatever came next. But tonight, peace in the desert, love in the wasteland, hope despite history. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The town of Sanctuary appeared like a mirage in the desert, a cluster of adobe buildings and wooden structures that seemed to have grown from the earth itself. It straddled the border between Arizona and Mexico, existing in that nebulous space where jurisdiction blurred and people came to disappear or start anew. Silas had expected judgment, suspicion, perhaps outright hostility. What he hadn't expected was indifference. The townspeople barely glanced up as their small party rolled down the main street. Apache, Mexican, white, and every mixture between went about their business without the rigid segregation he'd grown accustomed to. There. Morrison pointed weakly to a building marked with a crude painted cross. Dr. Marcus Fitzgerald. He wrote to me once, offered sanctuary if ever I needed it. The doctor proved to be a thin man with gentle hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He took in their ragged appearance, the women's Apache features, Silas's protective hovering, and simply nodded. Get him inside, Fitzgerald ordered. Sarah, was it? You've been treating him? Good. Tell me everything. As they settled Morrison into the small clinic, Silas found himself relaxing incrementally. No one had demanded papers, questioned their relationships, or reached for weapons. It was unsettling in its ordinariness. You'll need lodging, Fitzgerald said after examining Morrison. Martha Gonzalez runs a boarding house 2 streets over. Tell her I sent you. She doesn't ask questions if you pay on time. The boarding house was clean and quiet, run by a Mexican widow who'd buried 3 husbands and now treated all men with amused skepticism. She gave them 2 rooms without comment, one for Morrison when he was released, one for Mr. and Mrs. Clay and family. That night, as they shared their first meal under a real roof in weeks. Sarah raised the question they'd all been avoiding. "What now? We're here, safe for the moment. But then what?" "We work," Mary said practically. "Earn our keep, build a life." "That simple?" "Nothing's simple," Silas corrected. "But it's a start. I can hire on as a hand at one of the ranches, or maybe find work breaking horses. You both have skills. Cooking, sewing, healing. I want to learn to read better," Sarah said suddenly. "To write properly, not just the little bit the missionaries taught." "There's a school," Mary said. "I saw it when we rode in. Mixed classes. For children." "For anyone who wants to learn," Silas said. "This place, it's different. Has to be, to survive out here." They spent the next weeks establishing routines that felt almost like normal life. Silas found work at the livery stable, his skill with horses quickly earning respect. Mary took in washing and mending, her precise work gaining customers among the town's more prosperous citizens. Sarah split her time between helping Dr. Fitzgerald and attending the small school, where she was indeed the oldest student but not the only adult. Morrison recovered slowly but steadily, eventually taking over the town's tiny chapel. His sermons drew curious crowds. Apache ceremonies blended with Christian teachings in ways that would have horrified traditional clergy but seemed to comfort Sanctuary's mixed population. It was almost peaceful. Almost. The trouble came, as Silas had known it would, on a blazing afternoon when the heat made the air shimmer like water. He was working with a particularly difficult stallion when he heard the commotion horses, shouting, the distinctive sound of armed men making their presence known. Through the stable doors, he saw them, 15 riders, hard-faced and travel-worn. At their head rode Tom Brennan, the bounty hunter who'd let them go at the mission, but something had changed. His face was grim, purposeful. Silas quickly made his way to the boarding house, where he found Mary and Sarah already aware of the danger. "They're going door to door," Mary reported, "asking about us specifically." "Something's changed," Silas said. "Tom wouldn't come back without reason." They didn't have long to wonder. Within an hour, Brennan had tracked them down, appearing at their door with 2 of his men. But instead of weapons, he held papers. "Silas," he said wearily, "we need to talk, privately." They met in the boarding house's small parlor, Martha Gonzalez hovering disapprovingly in the background. Brennan looked older than when they'd last met, worn down by something more than travel. "Federal marshal was killed 2 weeks ago," Brennan said without preamble. "Found with Apache arrows in his back. Government's response has been severe." "We've been here for over a month," Silas said. "I know. That's not why I'm here." Brennan pulled out a creased document. "New orders from Washington. All Apache living off reservation to be considered hostile. No exceptions for Christian converts, married women, or children. Return or be killed." "That's insane. That's policy. And it gets worse." Brennan leaned forward. "They're offering amnesty to anyone who helps round them up. Full pardons for past crimes, cash bounties, land grants. Every criminal and opportunist in the territory is about to turn hunter." "Including you?" Brennan's laugh was bitter. "I'm done with that game. Came to warn you. Actually, you've got maybe 2 days before the first wave hits Sanctuary. After that..." He shrugged. "Why warn us?" "Because I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing differently." Brennan stood. "My wife, ex-wife now. She moved to California. Been writing, asking me to come. Says there's work for a man who knows horses and doesn't mind honest labor. You're leaving the territory? Tonight. Suggest you do the same." He moved to the door, then paused. "That conversation we had about the salt flats? You were right. We all saw things in the desert, did things. Maybe it's time to stop letting the desert define us." After he left, they gathered in their room, Silas, Mary, Sarah, and Morrison, who'd arrived as soon as he heard, "We can't run forever." Sarah said quietly. "No," Mary agreed. "But we can't fight the entire government either." "Mexico," Morrison suggested. "I have contacts in Sonora, a mission that would welcome us." And live as perpetual exiles? Mary shook her head. Never able to return, always looking over our shoulders? Better than dead, Silas pointed out. Is it? Mary stood, paced to the window. I'm tired of running, tired of being told where I can exist, who I can love, how I can live. If they want to make outlaws of us for the crime of being Apache, then perhaps— Don't say it, Silas warned, recognizing the look in her eyes. Perhaps we should be the outlaws they fear, she finished. The room erupted in argument. Morrison counseled patience and faith. Sarah advocated for Mexico, for safety. Silas found himself torn between protecting them and understanding Mary's frustration. It was Martha Gonzalez who settled it, entering without knocking as was her way. You think you're the first to face this choice? She demanded. Half this town exists because someone, somewhere, decided they didn't fit. We make our own law here, our own peace. You want to stay? Then stay. But you stand with us. Fight with us if needed. The government, Morrison began. The government is 3 days' ride away and busy with other troubles. Martha interrupted. We've survived Apache raids, bandit armies, drought and disease. We'll survive this too. Over the next day, sanctuary transformed. Windows were boarded, weapons cleaned and loaded. The town had faced threats before and developed a simple strategy make attacking more costly than leaving them alone. When the first bounty hunters arrived, they found not a sleepy border town but a fortified community. Every rooftop had riflemen, every street corner had barriers, and at the center, in the small plaza, stood the people they'd come for, Mary and Sarah, but also a dozen other Apache who'd made sanctuary home. Around them stood their neighbors, Mexican farmers, white merchants, former slaves, Chinese railroad workers, America's unwanted, making a stand. The leader of the bounty hunters, a scarred man named Dutch Williams, rode forward under a white flag. We don't want trouble with the town, he called out. Just here for the Apache, turn them over, and we ride on. It was Fitzgerald who answered. The mild doctor transformed into something harder. These people are our neighbors, our friends, our family. You want them. You go through us. There's 30 of us. You can't win. Maybe not, Silas said, stepping forward. But how many of you will be left to collect that bounty? Half? Less? That worth it for a handful of peaceful folk who just want to live? The standoff stretched taut. Then, from the boarding house, came singing, Morrison's voice, cracked but clear, raised in an old hymn. One by one, others joined. Apache ceremonial chants blending with Spanish folk songs, Christian hymns mixing with Chinese melodies. The sound was chaotic, beautiful, defiant. Williams looked uncertain. His men shifted nervously. They'd expected fear, isolation. Not this unified front, this willingness to die for neighbors. This is madness, he finally said. No, Mary called out. This is family. This is home. This is what America could be if fear didn't rule. Pretty words won't stop bullets. No, but they might stop you from firing them. She stepped forward, Silas moving protectively beside her. Look at us. Really look. I work alongside Martha Gonzalez, whose husband I might have fought in the Apache Wars. Sarah learns letters from a Chinese woman who speaks 3 languages. Silas, a white man, stands ready to die for Apache women. This is the future, Mr. Williams. You can be part of it or try to stop it, but you can't destroy it. It's already growing, spreading, becoming. For a long moment, the future balanced on a knife's edge. Then Williams lowered his rifle. This is a mistake, he said. Government won't stand for it. Then we'll face that when it comes. Fitzgerald replied, but not today. The bounty hunters withdrew, not in defeat, but in confusion. They'd come hunting easy prey and found instead a community that defied their understanding. That night, sanctuary celebrated. Not victory, they knew others would come, but survival, unity, the possibility of something new. Silas found himself dancing with Mary in the plaza. Sarah laughing as Morrison attempted to learn Apache steps from an elderly woman. "It won't last," Mary said quietly. "They'll be back, with more men, more authority. Maybe, or maybe word will spread. Maybe other towns will see what's possible." He pulled her closer. "Either way, we made our stand, together. No regrets. Only one." He stopped dancing, looked into her eyes. "I should have asked you properly before. Mary Crow, will you marry me? Not for papers or protection, but because I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you?" Her answer was a kiss that drew cheers from the crowd. When they parted, Sarah had joined them, creating their familiar circle. "Does this mean I'm officially family now?" she asked with mock seriousness. "You always were," Silas assured her. "Both of you, from that first night in my barn, though I was too stubborn to see it." Morrison performed the ceremony 3 days later, blending Apache and Christian traditions in a service that would have scandalized proper society. Half the town attended, turning it into a festival of hope despite the uncertain future. That night, as they lay together officially as husband and wife, Mary traced the scar on Silas's ribs, the one her people had given him. "We've come so far from where we started," she murmured. "Not far enough yet," he replied, "but we're heading in the right direction." Outside their window, Sanctuary settled into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The government wouldn't ignore their defiance forever. But tonight, in this room, in this town that shouldn't exist, 3 broken people had built something whole. "I used to dream of destruction," Silas admitted in the darkness. "Now I dream of building a real ranch, maybe horses, a place where Sarah can teach school, where you can be yourself without fear, where our children can grow up free," Mary added softly. The words hung between them, precious and dangerous. Children of mixed blood, carrying the hope and burden of 2 worlds. "It's possible," Sarah said from her bed across the room. "If we make it possible." "Then we will," Silas declared. "Whatever comes, we'll face it, together." The desert wind sang through the streets of Sanctuary, carrying dust and dreams in equal measure. Somewhere out there, forces gathered that would test their resolve, but in this moment, in this place, love had carved out a small space for hope. It was, they all knew, only the beginning. The real work, building a life, a community, a future that honored both their pasts and their possibilities, lay ahead. But they'd taken the first steps, chosen their ground, declared their intentions, in the borderlands between nations, between races, between past and future. They'd found home, not in a place, but in each other. And that, perhaps, was the greatest sanctuary of all. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles but bearing witness nonetheless. And in a small room in a town that shouldn't exist, 3 souls slept peacefully, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Their love story was far from over, but this chapter, the chapter of running, of fear, of separation, had come to an end. What lay ahead was unwritten, uncertain, but filled with possibility, and that was enough to build a life on. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts on this tale of love, redemption, and finding home in the most unlikely places. Until next time, partners.